Most people wake up and go to sleep at night thinking that they can't win this. Their self-perception is that they cannot be healthy. I don't have the money. I don't have the genetics. Takeout food is delicious. They do not believe. And if you cannot change their self-perception, you will never change their behavior.
Welcome back to the Fitt Insider podcast. I'm your host, Joe Veneri. Today I'm joined by Adam Bornstein. Adam is an author and the founder of Born Fitness. In this episode, we discuss the power of storytelling. Adam shares his learnings from 2 decades of creating content in the fitness industry. Plus, we talk about his new book that aims to dismantle diet culture. Let's get into it. The Fitt Insider podcast is brought to you by Jack Taylor, our exclusive PR partner. More than just PR, they're creative storytellers and brand builders who actually understand the health and wellness industry. To learn more, head to jacktaylorpr.com/fit. That's FITT. Hey, Adam, welcome to Fitt Insider. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Joe. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man, we were chatting a little bit offline, and I mentioned that I think maybe like a lot of folks in the fitness industry and a lot of health and fitness seekers followed your work for a number of years now. I think in a very common sense, direct, kind of no nonsense way of presenting what can be a very flashy, marketing, get fit quick at times industry. You've kind of been that a constant, I think, across a number of the brands. So, your background, writer, editor, building businesses, consultant, a number of things. But maybe just to kick things off, how do you describe what it is that you do, and what is that kind of, quick intro for folks who aren't familiar?
Yeah, I think the long and short of it is I'm a traditional media guy who was reared more in psychology, right? Psychology and journalism was the background. And I determined the best way to use that at a time, now a long time ago, right, was creating content in the magazine world and then eventually in the online world, right? I was the fitness and nutrition editor for Men's Health for a while. I ran livestrong.com during its peak when you had like 45 million people a month coming to the site. I did leave sometime before the debacle and everything that happened, surrounding Lance and everything that was then related to him through the brands. And then for the last 10, 12 years, I've just really been focused on building brands, content, marketing. They all kind of overlap. I think the thing that I do really well, the thing that has allowed me to work with people both inside and out of fitness, is I'm a storyteller. And I think storytelling is a superpower that throughout time and space, no matter how much technology changes or advancements come, how well can you tell a story in a way that it clarifies what you do, how you help people, and how you are different, right? It doesn't matter whether it's acquisition or retention or engagement. Stories are what people relate to. Stories are what make people relevant. And if you can understand how to leverage a great story, you can do pretty much anything. So my job is to help people tell great stories, whether it's writing books, whether it's building websites, whether it's creating products, whether it's marketing CPG, whether it's building up some of the biggest podcasts in the space. Tell great stories by understanding the audience, build that connective tissue, and then take it from there. And because there's so many great stories to tell, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's easy, right? In theory, harder to execute. I think there's no shortage of people that kind of strive to tell great stories or create compelling content, build relationships with an audience, build a brand, business, what have you, to then be able to, to some extent, when we think about this with Fitt Insider, you build that relationship, you continue to build value for people, and then you can run all different things through that channel that you've built up and that relationship that you have to continue to earn. Basically, like they say in, baseball, you're only as good as your last at bat. It's like in the content game, it's like you're only as good as your last newsletter or podcast or tweet or whatever it is. So you have to continue to show up every day. Obviously, you have demonstrated your ability to do that. I'm curious where the intersection with health and fitness comes. You've worked in a number of brands with a number of, celebrities, talent, etc. inside and outside of the industry, but specifically the thing that you've kind of seemingly come back to time and time again is this, and maybe never have left, is the focus on health and fitness. So is that a personal passion, something that you've just thought about how you do it for yourself, how you help other people, maybe where that came into the mix and how you're able to turn that into a career?
Yeah. It's both. It's both a personal passion, and it's one of those things where I have a lot of experience, right? In what seems like a different phase of my life, I was a trainer, and then I got certifications in nutrition, so I loved it, and that interest sparked out of own hardship, right? Growing up as a teenager, I had some like unexplained illness. It's still unexplained. I'm part of NIH's rare diseases program. I've got this bizarre disease where I get crazy high fevers that no one for the last, oh man, nearly 30 years now, I'm going to date myself, has been able to figure out. Right. And then in high school, I broke my back twice. And the second time I broke my back, doctors kind of showed me a future of what my life would look like, which was not being active, not being able to play the sports that I love. And I kind of sat there and I was like, wow, well, this really sucks. And I just chose not to accept it. And I became fascinated with the human body. Right. But not fascinated like, oh, I'm going to do my own research. I actually wanted to learn from the best people. And in doing that, in that quest for knowledge, I got to meet a lot of brilliant people on the fitness side, on the nutrition side, on the general health side. And that's where I really cut my teeth. And then I realized at some point I wanted to pursue this. And in trying to pursue this and leading up to what led to Men's Health and Livestrong and all these brands and celebs and everyone that I work with, I realized the cool thing about health and fitness is that you have this unbelievable opportunity to do something that is so much bigger than yourself. So much bigger. Like there isn't a single person who doesn't care about their health, no matter where they are in their health journey. So whether you help them at the highest level to become like the greatest athlete in the world, right? I've had the name drop. I've had the pleasure of working with LeBron James, right? I have the pleasure of working with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Or whether you help that person who is hundreds of pounds overweight and feels that like their health is a curse and they're going to die, and you can help them turn it around and give them a way, an exit path off that direction that they're going. It's pretty powerful, right? There are not that many things that you can do where, if you help people solve that, or if you give them a small little tool that makes them a little bit healthier, like a product that they will use routinely that they love that makes them better, or in an app or a workout that they can rely upon, that's great. And that makes it, it's hard, right? There's a lot of competition in this space. It can be difficult because there are a lot of things that don't actually help people. But the mission of health and fitness itself and the importance of health for people and how much we see it, it's almost like this losing battle, right? People are becoming more and more unhealthy. It's crazy, that, this point in the United States alone, right? 75% of people are overweight or obese. Now, you can kind of pick those numbers apart because it's based on BMI, but like in general, but directionally accurate when 3/4 of a country with all of this money that's spent on health. People say that we don't spend money on health. We definitely spend a lot of money on health. Wellness itself is a $1 trillion industry, right? Now, we're not necessarily applying it the best way. We're not necessarily utilizing that cash. The solutions aren't necessarily what's going to help. There's there's not a lot of reactive rather than proactive, right? But there's a lot of money spent, and there's a lot of people who are not healthy. And it's not just in the US, right? Globally, for the last 3 decades, that overweight and obesity trend has also continued to go up. So then when you look at the opportunity, you look at how important it is, and you look at what a big problem it is, it becomes really easy to just be like motivated and excited and, I think just determined to help people figure this out. Because I think the coolest thing about this industry is there isn't a one size fits all solution for everyone. People are different. People have different lifestyles. People have different goals, different things that they want. So there's so many different ways to lend your expertise in a way that you can attract, assist, and help different people figure out what it is that stands in their way so that they can become healthier. They can become a little better. When that happens, oh my God, it's the best feeling in the world. It truly is. So that's why I love this industry. I hate how much of a struggle it is, but I love the mission and the purpose of, what people in the space are trying to accomplish.
For sure, and that resonates with me, and I want to get into some of the ways that that money is spent and what it looks like and solutions versus snake oil and all those sorts of things that we kinda run into, but maybe pull on this thread a little bit more here because even as you're talking about it, your passion for the space, and then marrying that with storytelling and then leveraging that into these relationships and figuring out how you can affect change in people and all of that. I think that resonates with me, that resonates with a lot of the listeners, right? Who we have a ton of people constantly coming, through various channels, whatever, email, social, that are saying like, I'm so passionate about this space, but I'm in a consulting job or I'm in working at this type of, whatever company, fintech, like how do I make a career for myself and in a way that I can help people in the way that you're speaking about. And for us, it's been, we were trainers. We worked in the gym. We were group fitness instructors. We owned gyms. Then we went online. Then we got into the startup world. It's always been like, how do we kind of compound and scale up and broaden the reach of like, well, if we can help one person, if we can help 10 people, if we can help 100 people. And now it's like, can we help millions of people? Can we help tens of millions of people? Like that same goal. Is there something that you kind of attribute that to or can point to say like where other people might come up short or not be able to kind of figure out like how do I take this and say okay, I have this passion, I have this knowledge, I have this work ethic, but like where do I even apply it and how do I begin and maybe what does that look like, whether it's what it looked like for you or even as you see the landscape like hey, maybe this is white space that people could potentially attack or go towards.
Yeah, I think the thing, and most entrepreneurs would probably tell you this, like their journey is their journey. Like trying to replicate someone else's journey is really, really difficult. The thing that matters is probably like an obsessive focus with a problem that you want to solve and not like a problem that you think exists for someone else, but a problem that you fundamentally have. Can't tell you how many founders of companies have gone out there that they're trying to solve a problem that they think exists that is not like personal to them. It doesn't mean that that can't exist, but so many great companies, massive companies, the biggest ones tend to start from a pain point. It doesn't even have to be a company, right? Like for 5 years, I worked with Tim Ferriss, right, and would help on the marketing and production, and help them early on with the podcast. And I learned so much from Tim. And one of the things that was so interesting when he wanted to build out the podcast was he was kind of scratching his own itch. And the more that I spent time with him and learned from him, right, the more I saw that so many of these huge successes he had, whether it was the books, right? Like 4 Hour Work Week or 4 Hour Body, was him scratching his own itch. When it was the podcast, it was like he just wanted to have these fascinating conversations with people. And then you start looking at all of these other companies that take off, and it's people that are solving their own problems by really then trying to understand the problem at a depth. And then as they start to understand the problem, they start asking the questions like, well, what skill set is needed to be able to attack this? And sometimes you have to realize that you need to either partner with someone or outsource. Sometimes you realize that you kind of have to, quote unquote, go back to school to build up the capacity to do this, right? For me, it was learning that, there was a time that I was working as a university researcher and I'm teaching at colleges. And I realized that like I didn't like being confined to the classroom. And not that I didn't love teaching. I love teaching. If anyone wants to hire me as a teacher, I would do it in probably in a second. But at the time, and this is like, pre-social media, right? You could reach the people in the classroom. You couldn't reach beyond that. And I wanted to become a better communicator. And I felt that I could be a great communicator, but I wasn't classically trained as a journalist. I was classically trained in social psychology and exercise physiology, right? Like, so I understood human behavior and I understood movement, but I didn't understand this. I went back and, I got a master's degree in journalism. I was on a professional track and I went back. And then, when I wanted to learn how to like run businesses or grow businesses, when I started my own businesses, I learned from other people, right? I job shadowed people. I wanted to be a fly on the wall. And I think like that obsessiveness requires a lot of patience. And most people lack the patience it takes to see something through and don't realize how much time it takes to bring an idea to life. And that doesn't mean you wait until it's perfect, right? There are these two things that seemingly are dichotomous, that they seemingly conflict, and that, like, and I've had the privilege of working. The name dropping is going on with Reid Hoffman, right? Founder of LinkedIn and PayPal. And he was famous of talking about, like, your first product should be like the worst iteration of it, right? If you're waiting till it's perfect, you've waited far too long, because, like, that first version, you're going to get so much customer feedback. So you don't want to wait too long. But you also don't want to put something out before you have put in the thought and receive the consumer feedback to know that you have that product market fit, to know that you have something that will truly stick, and to know that you are bringing something that it, like, fundamentally satisfies people. So I think, like, the journey of the entrepreneur, the journey of the person who has this interest, begins with, like, what is your pain point, and continues with how are you going to solve it, and comes to life when you go the extra mile to find a better solution, and then really becomes an opportunity when you see, when you present this to other people, how much they want to do it, and then you just go for it, right? uh, Sam Parr, who was the founder of The Hustle, talks like you really don't have a product until you've, like, sold it once, even if it's not ready. Like, if you haven't sold something at least once, like, you don't got shit, right? So, like, is then at some point you have to ask, like, is the problem that you felt you were solving, that you're scratching your own itch, that you're attacking this, is it truly a need, or is it just a want that you have? And then when there's some interest, and then when there's someone who would buy or would buy in or really excited, that's when you just kind of, like, push go, and you begin that wild ride, which is, like, the first version's probably going to suck. But if people wanted it, you know that there's a demand there, and then it's your job to just make it good enough that people like it so much they tell other people about it.
Hey, I think that was really well put, especially as you're talking about it, even from the brief introduction of your own story, it's like from a doctor kind of telling you how you were going to have to live, or all the things maybe you weren't going to be able to do, or not being able to make sense of your own health issues, to, like, hey, I'm going to solve these, and have the kind of passion and obsession to stick with it long enough to continue to then figure it out and bring it to life and see all the different forms that it's taken. And yes, the piece that I think oftentimes gets left out, which is the patience to, like, pursue that, stick with it, show up every day, struggle, endure, and then actually get somebody to pay for it, actually get somebody to sign up for it, actually
There
get
are
somebody
all
to
these
convert.
aha moments, right? Like, I'm
Yeah.
sitting there and I broke my back as a freshman in high school in a basketball game, right? Someone pulling up for a little, like, leaner, someone takes my legs out from underneath me, behind me, up in the air. Gym floors, they're really hard, right? And I go through what back then, this was like then the 90s, you guys, like early mid 90s. And, like, my treatment was going to massage therapy 3 times a week. And they're telling me how I've got stenosis in the spine and all the stabilizers are too weak. And I had a pars stress fracture, L3, L4, lower back. And, like, they're telling about weakness, 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 but there was nothing to be done to strengthen. I literally went to massage and it was, like, painful because I've got broken bones in my back.
Yeah.
And I get done and they, like, let me go back to all this activity. I played multiple sports. And then, like, I break it again. And they're telling me, and it's like I literally had a day where I, like, woke up and, like, I couldn't, like, feel my legs. And, like, the doctors are like, "Okay, this is it. It sucks." And my parents, thank goodness, like, found me they grew up in Chicago, the team doctor of, like, the Chicago Bulls and the Blackhawks and, like, the Cubs, and, Dr. Schaefer out there. It just to see, like, well, what does someone who, like, works with a professional clientele who deal with, like, really bad injuries, what do they say? And he's like, "Yeah, like, forget the massage therapy. You need to, like, strengthen yourself." And you see this gap something where, like, injuries were treated with, like, let's do what makes you feel good rather than what makes you feel stronger. And it's like, well, are we just focusing on the wrong thing right now? So, like, early on, like, there was this pivotal shift in terms of, like, even how we treat people, how we proactively do it. And we continually see this shift. So anytime you see this problem where, like, fundamentally, like, the pieces don't add up, right? Me as a teenager looking at this, it shouldn't be like, you have no the rest of your life you're going to be sedentary. Like, that doesn't really make sense. And I think we see these opportunities, like, these opportunities are everywhere, where sometimes the most obvious answer is right in front of us and we ignore it because we think, like, well, someone should have been doing this already? And it's like, no, it's probably being glossed over because we assumed that there was a solution to it. And I think a lot of what will come out is people are going to learn how to leverage technology better, right? AI is everything right now. But I think a lot of what it comes down to is like, how do we start asking ourselves different questions? Again, I'm gonna, in writing the book that I recently wrote, like I talk about like what helped me write this book, which was like a 9-year process of figuring out how to write this book, was a question that Tim would ask me all the time to Ferris, and he'd ask me like, what would it look like if this were easy? Which is such a difficult question to answer. But like it's a great place to start because usually it's the friction and complication that gets in the way of people taking action to make them better, right? I think cost, complexity, and convenience, the 3 C's, are fundamentally 3 things that become barriers for any healthy behavior or really any type of like product or service, right? The cost, the convenience, the complexity, because these are the things that make it harder for people to adopt a behavior. In the fitness space is about behavioral change. So then you start to have to ask yourself, like, how do you make it easier for most people, or really for your target audience, right? Because like for a target audience, so you can have a very, very expensive product where like that actually becomes like a piece of leverage for them because the cost gives them the convenience and removes the complexity. It's not that everything has to be cheap. It's understanding how these 3 C's interact with a target audience. And this is, again, a lesson from journalism. My mentor in journalism is Ted Spiker. And he always told me rule number 1 is know your audience. And I have carried that with me in writing, in storytelling, in marketing, in branding, in product. And when I nail it, I nail it. And when I've not nailed it, right? I thought I could fix the supplement industry at one point. The company called Ladder, right? Had like all the star power in the world: LeBron James, Cindy Crawford, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Lindsey Vonn. And when I look back, the company was acquired. In many ways, it was a success. But for me, it could have climbed so much higher. And when I asked myself, like, why and what could I have done differently? What could I have done better? It was like, that obsessiveness with the audience and their problem and the positioning and the product itself could have been so much more of a bullseye and could have been done much better. Because like when you know your audience, when you're obsessed with your audience, that's when the opportunities become pretty cool.
Yeah, I think going to that point about knowing your audience and potentially having the awareness of what works in the fitness industry or the wellness industry or in marketing in general, there's like, it's very easy to be pulled towards this get fit quick. Here's your solution. Here's your magic pill. Here's the hype. Here's the marketing. Here's all the amazing transformative guarantees that this product offers. And it's one thing that I've noticed with the work that you've done, even talking about like applying that to the supplement industry, where that's the hardest space to maintain this like level of being transparent and being honest and being direct about like what's actually going to happen, what the benefits are, etc. How have you navigated that where it's like the easy thing to do would just be to write the hype copy with like the flashy salesperson and push it out there and just totally lean into that, versus what I think you've done a great job of is like this very no nonsense, like much like we were talking about patience and sticking with it and, having a kind of common sense approach to it, like leaning into like, no, this isn't complicated, but it's not easy either. It's going to take work. And like, here's the things you need to do. What is that like? Like, is that a struggle? I guess, is that a conversation you have to come back to, whether it's with yourself or with partners or other businesses that you might be working with, where it's like, hey, why don't we just do this thing? Look, it clearly works. But obviously, the path of least resistance oftentimes is not the best one to take. How do you think about that, and what does that look like in practice? Hey everyone, we'll get back to the show in just a second. But first, I wanted to tell you about our exclusive PR partner, Jack Taylor. Honestly, this one's a no-brainer. We've known the Jack Taylor team for years. They work with some of the most innovative health and wellness companies. We're talking Whoop, Athletic Greens, Hyperice, and many more. Jack Taylor has an extensive industry network, knows how to work with high-growth companies, and really invests in building long-term relationships. I know this firsthand because they're Fitt Insider's PR agency, so I can confidently recommend them, and I do all the time. From startups to more established brands, they go beyond pushing product to help companies truly thrive. To learn more, head to jacktaylorpr.com/fit. That's FITT. Now back to the show.
I don't think there's one templated way to make a business successful. I think that's actually the fallacy. People try to copy other people's blueprints. Success leaves clues, but if you try to use someone else's blueprint, you're always going to be behind them, right? And the goal of business is to win, and the goal of fitness is to help people. So I think, with my consulting, I'm a pen name, like our job is fundamentally to like pick up the pieces, pick up those clues, but then adapt them in a new way that gives the business or company the best opportunity to stand out. And the best way to stand out is to understand your audience. And the best way to understand your audience is to know who your audience is, know what their pain point is, and then know what you are competing with. And oftentimes I think people think too myopically. And that is like, there will be like, oh, I'm going to come up with a product. What are the other products in the space? But like, products become brands, and brands become a connection with people, and a connection with people becomes like, how am I being entertained? How am I becoming educated? So you're not just competing with other products in the same space. You're competing with like the media that you're consuming, the personalities that you trust. And these are all things that you need to consider if you're going to break through the noise of like, it's not just like, what am I going to take? It's like, if I've got an extra 30 minutes of like scrolling on social media or watching something on YouTube or being on TikTok or being on more traditional media, what am I replacing? What market share am I stealing from someone? How am I going to get across to them? And that's like where the storytelling comes in. That's where the obsession with the audience comes in. That's where there's really a mix of the quantitative and the qualitative to figure out who you want to go after. And ideally, early on, you want to understand who's that super consumer, not just who's the person who's going to take it, but who's the person who's going to be such a brand advocate that they can't shut up about it. I think like my focus is less on like who would potentially buy this and more on like who is the 10% of an audience that's going to be the most vociferous, the most vehement about this, like if we truly do the job. Now you still have to execute. The product, the service, the good has to be so good that they're like, wow, this is life-changing. But knowing who that 10% of the audience is, and that 10% of the audience could be the amplifiers, right? The people who spread the message, the influencer, the creator, the brand, that then helps you give that top of funnel awareness. Or it could be the consumers who just go crazy about it. And that might not eventually be how you scale and grow market share, but it is how you create that tipping point in word of mouth. A great example is, early on, we did a lot of marketing work with Four Sigmatic, before like mushrooms were a big thing, right? Adaptogenic mushrooms. This is years ago. And the early obsession was like this idea of building a shroom club, these people who were interested in mushrooms and making them more mainstream so that they would like go deeper and engage more with the brand. And like they would hopefully tell like one or two of their friends that would be like, hey, like, what are you doing to be so healthy? Oh, I have this like more of a mushroom based coffee. It has these additional benefits. So it wasn't like, let's make mushrooms cool. Let's find the people who like kind of get this already, give them a product that doesn't exist in the market that makes it easier for them to do the things that is fundamentally in interest to them. And then how do we incentivize them? How do we reward them? How do we get their AOV, their average order value up, right? How do we create their lifetime purchase more? How do we then incentivize them to refer and bring more people in there where there's like a way to dip their toe in? And creating content around that where you answer a lot of these basic questions. So when people wouldn't be like, sure, like mushrooms, right? Because people would still be thinking like magic mushrooms, right? This is years ago, right? Now, when Four Sigmatic takes off, and their founder Taro is brilliant, and I can't take any of the credit for this, what he's done to guide that company and grow what it is. The trajectory of that business is much bigger than their initial Shroom Club. But what allowed them to win early on and bring in people and help make it more mainstream was speaking to the people who like they actually didn't have to educate as much because they were just waiting for that product out there. So I think this obsession with super consumers and finding those people and then giving them what they want and letting them become sales advocates is a great way to cut through the noise. And I truly think that, again, it gets back to that storytelling, but it's really about like, it is dangerous to try and copy someone's playbook. You can learn from it in terms of like how you want to go after an audience or how you want to spend money or like how it become very dangerous, right? There was a point in time where social media ads or even organic social was great. And then algorithms changed and it wasn't. And people were still using a playbook that was outdated. And now that's changed again, right? Like Apple changes the rules and the way you can track ads because changed like how are you now connecting with people? How are you breaking through? What do you do when you're a little bit more ad blind and can't leverage that as much? Selling and marketing is an iterative space, which is why, like, again, if you know the audience and if you know the product and if you know the value, your job is to package it up and get it in the right people's hands and then make them so damn crazy about it that they won't shut up. And that is evergreen. How you do it will keep on changing. But like what the goal is, I think, for any brand to take off is pretty much the same. It's find those super consumers.
Yeah, to that point, I think it's a good transition to the storytelling piece that you alluded to earlier. 9 years in the in the making. New book out. You can't screw this up. In many ways, the uh, anti-diet book, or the opposite of what the kind of diet industry is, and thinking about, like so many other aspects of health and fitness and nutrition, that it's like it's right there in front of us in some ways to eat whole single ingredient foods and take care of ourselves. And same way with fitness, like walk more, be more physically active, be outside, be in the sun, be around people that you care about, have social connections, like all these things that are in many ways free or within reach, but get overshadowed and pushed to the side by marketing pitches and confusing research and all different fads and trends that come and go. So maybe what was that 9-year process like, or how do you arrive at the point where you say this is the thing that you're going to devote the time and energy to? And what is that journey been like, kind of bringing it to life?
Frustrating one. It was a
Yeah.
book that I've wanted to write for so long, but like one, as you said, like this is a hard book to market because it doesn't have the things that people fundamentally respond to, right? People respond to fear and greed. Those are the primary emotions. So it's very easy to say something that is batshit crazy that makes them want to buy, right? And this is also like physiology. I talk about this in the book. Our brains light up and respond to things that are novel and different. So you hear the crazy claim and you don't want to believe it, but you're like, wow, that sounds amazing. What if
Yeah.
that was true? As opposed to when you hear the seemingly boring or banal, and you're just like, that how could that possibly work? So we keep on buying in to these cycles of like I call it like the dieting cycle of hell, right? It's a circle of hell, which is like you have a problem, you have this pain point, and you want to become healthier. You don't think anything can work from you, so you try this very, very restrictive diet, and you initially see results, right? So you cut out all carbs or you cut out all sugar. You go to an extreme, and it's a big extreme because it doesn't give you any room to move. And at some point, because you've gone to such a big extreme, you stop seeing results. But you saw results initially, so you're like, this thing must work, or it must have been a problem for me. So then you try and double down even more. So you grind those gears even harder. This is like going 100 miles an hour and deciding to be a good idea to go 150. So you go 150 and then like things get even worse. And one of two things happen, right? A, you kind of just say, screw it. And you eat anything, you stop working out, you think you can't win because like, man, look at all of the stuff that I'm doing. I'm doing more than I originally started and I'm not even seeing results anymore. Or you try and like go from 150 to 200, you completely flame out and you still end up saying like, screw it. And then you become apathetic and you think your body is broken. And then at some point, like you look at yourself or a friend says something or you go to a doctor and you realize you got to try again and you repeat the same thing, right? You try and do something extreme because you're like, man, remember those first 2 weeks when I cut out all carbs and I lost all that weight? Maybe that was the solution. They don't look at the repeated cycle of like how it grinded to a halt, how your body was like terrible. So we keep on finding this new extreme, and the diet industry is great at it. We keep on identifying a dietary villain to blame it. And this goes back to the 80s, right? It was fat and then it was carbs. And then, you've had gluten, you've had dairy, you've had eating at night for a while. Eating after 7 p.m. was going to make you fat. Then it was, let's do the opposite, right? Intermittent fasting, eating in the morning is going to make you fat. It was like, you got to eat all the vegetables in the world and suddenly lectins are going to kill you. So don't eat any of these. And for each reaction, there was an equal and opposite reaction, and diet became a religion. The diet industry, or the wellness industry, I should say, became less about wellness and more about industry. Because the more you could push someone towards an extreme, the more they would buy into this and then need to buy other things along with it. Instead of fundamentally asking, like, well, what are the things that actually make people healthy? And what makes people healthy are consistent, sustainable behaviors that you can turn into habits that you can do routinely. And that's it. That's not sexy. But what is sexy is that, again, we're 75% overweight and obese. And at what point, like, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again. And we think these diets are different things, but it's the same thing. We identify a single culprit and we blame it for everything. We create fear that drives maladaptive behaviors that cannot last, that break people mentally so they fail physically. Not the other way around. We think we fail physically and then we feel bad about ourselves and it's, I'm not motivated, I'm not this. No, no, no. These diets manipulate you. It is a manipulative relationship so that you will break down mentally and then you will fail physically. I mentioned a line in this book where I've been saying it all the time. You don't want to shoot a cannon from a canoe. And we're giving people a lot of really cool cannons that we make seem like it's just going to, like, this is going to blast off and make everything better. But they don't have a stable foundation of which they can, like, eat better, be healthier. So the whole point of the book was it doesn't matter what your health goal is. You need to start by building these stable foundations. And from that, you can take on more difficult behaviors, right? We demonize takeout. We demonize dessert and sugar. We make it seem that people have to work out every single day. In an ideal world, you do cook every meal. In an ideal world, you do exercise more frequently than not. But in no place and in no way, shape, or form does someone go from, like, not knowing how to be healthy to doing those things overnight. And when we tell them they can't eat takeout, and when we tell them they can't eat dessert, we do not give them a planned progression that will allow them to become healthier. We just don't. So it's just like, we got to stop giving people these overcomplicated plans. We have to stop making them think that they're going to screw up. And we have to give them a way so they can build healthier habits and realize that, like, these planned disruptions in their life are actually part of the plan, right? And it's okay. And when people get to that position, right, when they become healthier, when they have better things set up, it's easier for them to take on harder challenges, in the same way that if you tried to learn algebra or calculus without ever knowing addition or subtraction, you will never succeed. You will never succeed. If you try to learn to swim by starting in the deep end with sharks around you, it will never happen. You start in the shallow end, putting your foot in the water, learning how to tread water, then you learn the strokes. We have to stop taking people to the deep end of health and wellness if we want them to succeed. We can get them there eventually, but we got to start from a different place.
Yeah, it's so important. And, as you're going through all the various challenges or misconceptions or, deceptions in some cases outright, it's, you start to think about all the things that are stacked up against somebody, right? And even knowing this and doing the work of presenting the knowledge and sharing and educating sometimes, oftentimes is not enough when you think about, whether it's ultra processed foods and people being burnt out and people not having access to, healthier options, and the kind of laundry list of reasons that, in some cases, to some extent, no fault of their own, right? They're just in this pattern or in this kind of place in society where, like, all these things are not an option. They really can't get out of it. And everybody's experience with it is different. And in some cases, they know better, but are still not able to kind of make the decisions that are necessary to have consistent behavior change over time. And then you get into the angle from the wellness industry, which I think you put really well when you said it's more industry than wellness at this point. Is there a solution? Like, what is it that's like, hey, if there was this 1 to 3 things that if we did this, we'd all be better off? What does that look like, and how then do we kind of pull that lever and impact, like, the most amount of change for the most amount of people?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with, like, who you're trying to help, right? Because like, if you're
Sure.
trying to help the highest athlete become a better athlete, the problem you're trying to solve for them is different than the person who is, like, morbidly obese and you want to help. I think a lot of it starts with, like, understanding the environment that people are in instead of having people fight the environment. How do we learn to coexist? I mean, like, I think the food industry is a great example. I think there's so much opportunity, even though I had a lot of frustration, whether it's in supplements or food or healthy eating, because ultra processed foods are a problem. And you don't have to avoid them completely, right? So teaching people how to coexist with their environment, right? Getting people to go to the gym is difficult. And if you can get them to go a little bit frequently, they're more likely to adopt behaviors. So it's like, to me, it's like a first mover advantage of like, how do we conceptually change what people think it takes to be healthy? To me, the barrier for so many is that people don't think they can sustain it because when they think about health that itself, they think that the things that we need to do are so complicated and so extreme that the life that they want to live is not even doable. Everyone talks about a diet being a lifestyle, right? But like no one ever takes the time to ask like, well, what do you want your life to look like? And if you start with the idea of like know your audience, and there are many different audience segments, and you start with the obsession of like, well, what do you want your life to look like? People will start to give you clues about what they want in place and how can you build a product, a solution, a food, a service, an exercise that allows them to keep these things that they want that they don't think that they can have and then combine it with the things that they need in order to be healthier. Right? We have to stop making it seem that health is a game of the haves versus have-nots. It's not. Change is difficult, but change is possible if we fundamentally change what people think is needed for that to occur. And I talk about this concept of the comfort zone, right? People need to do things that challenge themselves, that take themselves out of their comfort. But we are taught that you need to completely abandon comfort in order to change, right? That is a misnomer. And this is explained by the Yerkes-Dodson curve, right? It's this inverted U that talks about like the amount of stress or anxiety you're in and your performance. And at one end, right? So the x-axis is going to be the stress or anxiety, and the y-axis is going to be performance. At one end, when there's no stress, when there's no anxiety, essentially like you don't change at all. You're told you don't have to do anything. You're perfect as you are. You don't see any change in performance, right? You're not being forced to change it. But at the other end, you see that performance is also low when there's so much stress and anxiety, right? So, like, you have to drop every food that you love. You have to be perfect with your workout. You have to buy all these supplements you can't afford. It's so far out that people are like, I can't do this. And it becomes a state of apathy and learned helplessness where they might do it in the short term, but they don't do it in the long term. Right, the great brands that win are the ones that help people build habits, then people become reliant on them because there's a dependency, but in a good way. Dependency because that one behavior gets them to do other healthy behaviors. So what I say is like the way that brands should think about this, the way that diet should think about this is like, how do you teach people to expand their comfort zone? And expanding their comfort zone means 1 foot in and 1 foot out. 1 foot out of like expanding, doing something that is outside their comfort zone that is difficult, but 1 foot in, doing something that is fundamentally comfortable, something that gives them a place where they think they can succeed, because then that level of comfort gives them enough of stable support, right? It is the stable foundation. It's not a canoe, it's a freaking battleship. So they can learn this new behavior. And when they learn that new behavior, the funny thing happens, and we see this over time, when people can master just one or two behaviors, those are actually the first dominoes that people realize that, like, oh, these other behaviors don't serve me the way that I once thought they did, because now I am better off. Now I can see that I can be a healthier person, right? Success breeds success. So the option shouldn't be like, what do I need people to achieve in the end? Right? Because if they're making too big of a jump, they can't cross that chasm. It should be like, what is the first mover advantage that gives them enough leverage and enough confidence that like now I have an opportunity, right? If it didn't exist, I would have called this book 0 to 1, right? Because it's just like most people never get to 1. When you get to one, and what I mean by one is this sense of confidence and control that you can change your body and that you are not a victim of circumstance, whether it's environment, whether it's genetics, all the different factors that do influence our health, because they do. But if you can get people to the point where they feel in control and where they feel confident, you can do anything. And more importantly, they will trust you for life. But do you care about helping people build that confidence and control, or do you just care about where you want them to go? Because if you truly care about what you want them to go, your first step is going to look very different than the final outcome. And if you're thinking about building a brand, if you're thinking about creating content, if you're thinking about helping people in the health and fitness space, you have to realize that that's the psychology. Most people wake up and go to sleep at night thinking that they can't win this. They want to. They want to be hopeful. They have hope, but they do not yet have belief because their self-perception, I talk about this, their self-perception is that they cannot be healthy for whatever reason. I don't have the money, right? I don't have the genetics. Takeout food is delicious. They do not believe. And if you cannot change their self-perception, you will never change their behavior. But if you can change their self-perception, this is James Clear, Atomic Habits, you can then change their action, and the action will then lead to more motivation, which will continue to change their perception, and they will keep getting better and better and better. And that's where it should be. Like, how do you get people to change their self-perception? Because if you're the one that gets them to change their self-perception, they are a fan, a consumer, a reader, a listener for life. And that's when you help people.
I think that's potentially the perfect place to wrap up, because as you're saying this, and I got the chance to check out the book, and I've haven't made it all the way through yet, full transparency, but I've enjoyed it.
It's got some meat to it. Yeah.
Yeah. And as someone, and this is why I wanted to mention it, is that as someone who knows a lot of these things, right, and spends a lot of time thinking about them and, learning the habits, but also beyond that, thinking about how you can present information, storytelling, knowing your audience, the psychology to affect change in all of these people who are trying to live a healthier lifestyle. I guess what I'm saying is, even if you're somebody who knows the healthy things to eat and knows what you have your nutrition habits locked in, I think it's applicable to read and understand and digest from the perspective of like understanding how to spread the gospel, so to speak, of, straightforward, actionable, like meaningful behavior change for the vast majority of people that need it. And you can apply that to whatever your passion or interest or skill set might be, but like knowing how to communicate it, it's a valuable resource from that perspective, beyond the, kind of incredible work that you did from like actually dissecting and kind of breaking down the misinformation around, diets that exist. So for folks who want to check it out, whatever reason, motivation they have, whether it's to get their nutrition habits in place or learn how to be kind of a better communicator about health and wellness, where can they do that? And where can they just follow your work in general?
Yeah. So the book is You Can't Screw This Up, and you can find it at can'tscrewthisup.com. So I tried to make the URL kind of almost tongue in cheek, can'tscrewthisup.com, and you can find it wherever there are books. On social, I'm at Born Fitness. And then for all the work that I do in the kind of marketing and branding space, it's just pen name. So penname.co is where I do most of my work this day with helping out companies figure out how to tell great stories and, help this world be a healthier place.
Yeah, it's incredible. We'll have everything linked up in the show notes. Encourage people to check it out, and really grateful that you spent some time chatting with us today. It was great to connect, and thank you for, sharing your insights and making time.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Joe.
One more thing before you head out. Help us spread the word. Take a minute to rate and review the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel, or share this episode with a friend. And if you like conversations like this, you'll love the Fitt Insider newsletter. We send it every Tuesday. The link is in the description. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you back here next week.